and welcome to everybody. I'm assuming a number of you came, including Joanne Clinton, because you had this connection with David Dorfman or with dance, and perhaps in part were enticed by the title of the comic, Dancing the Political. And one of the things I want us to talk about a little bit before we get into the discussion of your piece tomorrow is this relationship specifically between dance and politics, but generally between the arts and political commitments, the arts and politics. Right? So one of the things that, as many of you know, the piece that's being performed tomorrow night, Underground, is, in a manner of speaking, a riff on the story of the Weather Underground, and a set of interrogations about what are the nature of our political commitments and actions in the world today. Dance being your medium for presenting this. So maybe you could talk a little bit about this, right? This relationship.
Thanks, David. I mainly do movement-based theater productions. We use a lot of text. And I think, to co-opt a political term, by any means necessary to communicate what you feel is important at any given time. I tend to like the political. I like to feel what's going on in the world. I think I'm a little more attuned to what's going on in this country, which isn't that easy even, and more difficult to get what the truth is. And without necessarily taking a stand, I like to explore, as David mentioned, our ideas about action and what action is for each individual. And in this piece, the first line of the piece, which you'll even see it on the teaser video, is, does what we do make a difference? So that's really important to me. I think I can speak for the company as well. We work collaboratively. We've discussed this endlessly in a very positive way, even with tough moments. And so I like to make that a priority in making art. Our art happens to be dance. It's a broad definition of dance. I think the two can coexist wonderfully well. And it would be great to talk about the idea of almost a stigmatization of political art. I don't even know if on some days I'd call what we do political art. To me, it's dance theater with a political bend, in a way. I don't really care what it's called. I really don't. For me, if it brings up issues and people leave the theater a little bit differently than the way they came in and are asking questions, starting a dialogue, I'm really, really happy. And, I see Gabe Chandler in the audience, and forgive me, but I think it's okay. I find Gabe very political. He's a vegan. He doesn't. He rides his bike everywhere. He doesn't stand and preach. He doesn't convert. Whatever. I'm not saying that's bad or good, but I don't find that I find it a public display of his politics in a very interesting way. And this is yet a different way. We invite people. We make big posters and we have common hours about it. And I love that. I've done it for 25 years. But there's all different levels of politics, both personal, local, and global. This is the way that I like to do it.
So let me press this a little bit more, right? Because there's a way in which dance, you can present dance as an occasion to think through political issues or think through one's politics. But there is something very specific about what dance does, right? That is different from Gabe riding his bike, eating a sprout sandwich. Go, guys. Keep running.
Well, I think one of the things is that we're dancing with our bodies. We're embodying politics in this particular piece, and potentially we are. It's a body politic of a different sort that maybe we would normally think about. If Martha's my dance mom, my dance dad would be Daniel Nagrin, with whom I studied here in '79 and many other occasions. And he would always say, and was quoted internationally as saying that you put two people on stage, it's political. Okay, it's political who's in this room today. It's political how we introduce ourselves. It's political what we put on stage. We've had a lot of discussion, even of late, of how we're ending the piece, how we begin the piece, how do the men come off, how do the women come off. Is it gender-based politics as much as more violence, nonviolence, politics. And are those inseparable? No, I don't think. So I think that it is particular in dance because we are using our bodies, and even though this is probably the most character-driven, and thanks to Alex Timbers, who humbly presented himself as working with the company, but he's co-directing the piece. Don't look at him now because he said he doesn't like public speaking, public looking or something. But so this is probably the most character-driven piece we've done, and at the same time, there's a high level of abstraction. And I love that openness to how we perceive a body, individually, collectively, in motion, under duress. There's some strong, and you could say violent imagery in the piece. I sometimes think of it more as urgent, even / compassionate. But it is strong, and it's body on body, and some of it is even survival-oriented. I sit most of the time on the outside in the piece for, other than the pre-show, which I am, I'm on stage for just a couple of moments. I watch them dance, particularly this first section that I'll show you on the video. And the way they look before and after, I mean, to me it tells an unbelievable story. It's almost as if you could, no one would want to, and I don't suggest this, but if one closed their eyes in the middle of that dance for a while, if you saw the beginning and the ending image, it would be like, enough. I think you could go home after seeing this unbelievable commitment. To me, that's political on another level. So I do think it's different when bodies are dancing.
So it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that this raises to me is exactly what you mean by the political. This is occasioned by Armando's question as well, right? I mean, there's a way in which, for example, a classical notion of politics is this notion of the contestation of power for the control of bodies, institutions, social order, right? That's one version of political. There's another version of what you're talking about that has to do with ethical commitments and moral action, right? And it's not always easy to differentiate between morality and politics, and moral and political, right? That's one sort of thing. Lying behind that, in terms of talking about dance, I mean, one of your, how should we call her? One of your predecessors here at Connecticut College, Martha Graham, right? She talks about dance as being about communication. So implied in this notion of communication, so if you take Martha Graham as one of the paragons of modern dance, and effectively framing what modern dance is about as communication, and then putting a gloss on the political and the moral or the moral on this, it's a very different sort of thing, because then you're saying there's a message, there's an intentionality to what the dance should be about or is about, as opposed to say what you had referred to earlier, right? That it might just get you to think.
I'll try to combine all those for a moment. I think in this particular investigation, and in most of the dances that I'm going to become involved with, there is the more standard, classical definition of politics at play. Power. Okay, so that's really important in this piece. And as I said the other morning, the idea of who's in power and how the folks that perceive themselves and are most of the time in reality out of power, how do they react and by what means? Okay, and that is an undercurrent of this dance and many dances that I like to do. On the other hand, I'm also, in this one in particular, thinking about morals and principles. So I'm trying to interweave those two. Martha Graham, I think, is a great example. In regard to her colleagues and compatriots and many of the people that actually danced in her company, but also were producing her own work at the time, she was seen as largely apolitical because she was doing kind of a combination of abstract and narrative dance. She wasn't doing dances at union events in the 30s and 40s. Okay, so she would be thought of as more of an aesthetician, if that's the right word, an aesthete. Okay. And so that would be.
I think it's the only reason I'm up here.
Thank goodness. So that you could divide it in that way, and Martha Graham, as opposed to the others, Pearl Lang, Sophie Maslow, in her crowd, is the one that was asked to do quote ads in print, magazines, etc. And at the same time, looking this summer as I did at a piece that was choreographed in the 30s and performed on Palmer's stage, completely radical. Movement in silence, all women, stillness for a long time. She didn't care what people thought. on many, many levels. It was an experiment, exploration. She went out on a limb farther than most of us are doing now at the time. Very political in that sense, political in an artistic sense, in an aesthetic sense. So I think they really are intertwined, kind of tying maybe the third element to this of messaging, as we were discussing the other day. I think messaging has kind of alternated as being a strong, or messaging being narrative, something that is important to get across in a piece of art, in this case dance, okay? Although we're not looking for one message by any means in this piece, I think we are going beyond folks enjoying the movement and the swirl of kinetics and the visuals in this piece. So we are, in my mind, messaging, okay? And I think that there's been various times in dance where that was something that people were interested in. My interest has nothing to do with whether it's in or out of style. It's what I really want to do. And another element that goes to that I'm thinking of Martha and some of the first class with Martha, and compositionally saying it's helpful to cue the audience. Give them a set of cues so that they can, in a way, keep up with you on some level. We like to cue by using text, okay? And so there maybe isn't a lot of text throughout, sometimes more than others, but I like to invite an audience. I don't believe that accessible is either a dirty word or washes out an aesthetic meaning or a pure love of pure movement.
Right.
I think they can coexist.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, if you take the conceit of modernisms as being this effort to abstract from everyday experience in order to reach some kind of universal message, in order to transgress. I mean, because I think one of the things that you're talking about in regard to the politics and the political is transgression, right? So what is the possibility of transgressing existing orders? What is the possibility of transgressing our received opinions, conventions, and so on, right? And now, of course, not all transgressions are equally good or interesting or respectable, right? But there is, or long-lasting. Because I mean, it seems to me that one of the things that's going on in your piece is this question of, do we only act on things that we think are long-lasting, or do we only act on things that appear to be transgressive, hence capturing our imagination for a moment, which is sufficient, right? So that all of these things can somehow be kept within the political, kept within our sense of the moral.
Can you explain more about the long-standing?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, for example, at a point like this, in a conversation like this, this is usually the point where someone talks about the civil rights movement, right? And why do they do that? Well, they do that because they want to say, the civil rights movement was a mass movement, a mass social movement, had a broad base, had aspirations, implications that were long, not just for immediate change, but for long-term change. Right. And one of the ways in which I read contemporary political culture as being deeply cynical is that it's kind of paradoxical, right? It doesn't people don't understand that, well, politics is, what's that old phrase, the slow pouring of hard wars, right? Back to paper, right? It's messy work, and it's slow work, and it's deliberate work. But people want quick action. Right? They want to throw themselves into something because they believe it's going something that's going to come up as soon. Right? And some manner of speaking, some of that does take place. But if the litmus is either extreme revolutionary action or I'm a minion in a political movement, right? Those are kind of anemic options. Right? And so that if we can somehow expand out what we mean by political commitment, if we expand out what we mean by political agency and moral agency, and I think this is one of the very provoking things about provocative things. This the provocative things. Yeah, exactly. Provoking. About your piece.
Thank you. Thank you for short-term and long-term explanations. I didn't really know to the extent of where you're going with that, and I do agree. I think that's at the heart of the piece, in the regard of, do our actions now add up, and how do we kind of regenerate motivation for further actions? And in a way, not so coincidental, you're a religious studies professor, it is a kind of a belief system. What are we believing in? Do we believe in politics? We were talking the other day and almost saying that, at its worst, politics is like bad theater. Kind of goes on, doesn't keep your interest, and doesn't do anything. And begins to look the same. So I would prefer to give every ounce of energy to making good theater political instead of politics bad theater.
But let's use this a little bit. I know you want to show some clips.
We could or could not. I mean, it sounds like maybe we could get a discussion going in that. Yeah.
But you want to ask a question? It's okay. I'll raise a question. All right. So then.
How are we doing time-wise? Because maybe we could. Okay. I'm glad to show this.
Yeah. The notion of politics as theater. Right. Because, again, one of the things I would like us to engage in a conversation about the aesthetics, the artistic quality of politics. Right? Because, if you think about this relationship between art and politics, there's a way in which there's a synthetic relationship, an organic relationship, as you were talking about. As long as you talk about power, as long as you provide an occasion for deliberation about how power is exercised and possessed, then that's politics. Like art is certainly an effective medium there. But there's all sorts of diminished forms of that, whether it's the political ad, whether it's the conventions. I'm talking about bad political theater. Because you know what's going to happen. You know the plot, right? You know the outcome. Right? It's bad political. There's no suspense there. There's not even romance in it. Contrast that sort of bad political art to what I consider to be exemplary political art, which is underground.
Well, I'll have to say this, and we keep working on every piece that we do. Very happy with where this one is, and again, it's an ongoing process. And after this show, we have 6 or 7 rehearsals before performing in New York. Even after that, going on tour, we'll do minor adjustments. What I was thinking about in terms of a convention is that conventions are just as David described them. Occasionally, there's one good speech. And when someone comes up after a show and says, "Wow, there were some nice moments in your evening," not a good thing. And, it is and it isn't. But it's kind of, if there were a couple of nice moments, that means for the majority, you were not happy, engaged, provoked, angry, and I'd rather people be feeling something, even if they hate what's going on stage. I don't want like a lukewarm impression, just not, no, I'd rather be somewhere else. So, so I would really like to engage. Our tools of engagement, are a kinetic sense, suspense, a dramatic tension, some even highly abstracted storyline. So I hope that's how we're working. One thing that comes up as well is the idea of movement vocabulary and literal engagement amongst and between the performers. The vocabulary in this piece is a bit more direct, a bit more slashing, a bit more almost militaristic, partly because of my kind of fascination with Weather Underground and other underground groups or other political activist groups that can be, in another breath, called terrorist groups. And are they the military, which I would be very afraid of and object to, and are they one and the same? So, hopefully we're giving a pleasing and attractive and compelling duplicity by putting that kind of movement on stage. Again, a political convention or a political ad, sometimes I get interested in the political ads. I'm outraged by them, and I'm a little bit interested. Is that really? Can that possibly be true? Did that person do that? There's one that I can't remember who it was for, but I couldn't believe it. It was just outrageous. Well, they had somebody acting, impersonating one of the politicians. And you saw the back of his head. It was outrageous, and so it was kind of like such bad theater that it was good theater. It was really strange. And so I want to Instead of it being rambling and typical, I want it to be expressive and singular. So that's our goal anyways. And then, not that one would come away with a singular impression. I still don't. I think many performers don't either. I change my opinions. Talking about, I come out on the side of it's okay to, even though I wouldn't do it, it's okay to destroy buildings and not people. And that was brought up the other morning. And then, Claudia, Dean of Religious Spiritual Life, said, yeah, that's the same rationale that folks that blow abortion clinics think as well. So it's not like a right or wrong. It's not at all. But it's kind of a how far would you go to reverse a trend? What would you do if you feel unanswered in your agency? And how far would you go to get a different kind of agency, even if it's momentary? Right. And that's kind of the questions I'm putting forth. Some people have, this one gentleman in San Francisco said, I'm not sure what you want us to do. This is after the show. I'm not sure what you want us to do. Do you want us to go and break windows? To burn down buildings? To vote? To be complained? Or whatever? And it's like, I have no idea. I will not support the destruction of anything. We'll go against that. And what I present in this piece is an ambivalent admiration of those, whether underground, that went to that extent to try to make change.
It's fascinating to me that my hunch is that your ambivalent admiration, as you put it, to folks like the members of the Weather Underground, or anyone willing to go to such extremes to intervene in the social order so that they can change things. Part of that is a sense of our passivity, right? So that, that's a sign of life. That's a sign, not just of political life, but that's a sign of life, which, frankly, we don't see enough of, right? So that there's and part of the discourse about political agency is that you can get people going. What gets you going? I mean, this, as someone who teaches young people, this is constantly going through my mind. What will get you going? What is going to make you think a little bit differently? Hopefully a lot differently. What is going to get you to engage with each other in ways that you don't normally engage with each other? And these are, but these are high thresholds. Right? And what I love about the piece underground is that it's not only an intervention, but it sets a high threshold, right? So that when the fellow in San Francisco asks you, well, if Dorfman, what should I do? He clearly was presented with a challenge. Whether you intended it or not, he was clearly presented with a challenge. And that is part of the singularity part. To convey those kinds of challenges, where I'll write an essay. I'll hand it around. There might be some beautiful moments in it, but more likely than not, people are going to be moved into action, or at least deliberation about action, after seeing your piece on the art, after my very well-crafted essay. I don't know the statistical proof on it. That would be interesting. I do love the sense that there is a feeling of possible transference and almost a surrogate possibility of enlivening as you are in the audience, and I'm always thinking of how to activate an audience, and you see someone on stage. An important thing for all time for me is not to have the folks on stage in any way emanating the feeling of, look at what we can do, most likely you cannot do this, and it's more that, kind of come along with us. We can kind of do this together, and if you train with us, that's a very practical way, and even more metaphorically, we can do this. So I think that when you see someone on stage, it can get you excited, I will admit, perhaps, if done well, in a different way than perhaps reading an essay. It can get you in trouble. The whole idea of object, its cousin of objectification,
identification. I mean, it can be really positive and negative in that, whereas even though a paper is even more of an object, it doesn't have those same connotations. But I think at best it can really get conversations going, and I love that.
But I like this idea of the bodily conversation. Right. I mean, you know, when I had the occasion to see your group rehearse, I work at the piece at NYU, I thought, you know, this is really a bodily dialogue. So that, you know, you had folks interacting with each other, you know, there were tumbles, there were emotions, there were, you know, and it was like a conversation, you know, where someone would start something but sort of drop the point and then move on to something else, right? And you know, you know, I can't dance for beans, but I was. I want to get into these conversations. Right?
And I love that about it. And I also, it's, you know, we talk about low stakes assignments and low stakes writing and all that at college. And at the same time, I find the rehearsal process, everything that we do, kind of high stakes. If you're throwing your body at someone and they need to catch it, or
well, hence my staying in my seat.
And if you're doing a turn where your entire body is over and then you throw a leg, it's pretty kind of in a way blind, both literally and figuratively, and hoping not to strike another person. You know, there's a lot there, and that's, I mean, the obvious things of trust and a certain spatial knowledge. But I think it even goes deeper in the sense of creating something together, and even people that might have disparate views bonding. You know, that's one thing that you know, to me is like the bottom line, a very idealistic way that maybe we could be modeling. You know, it's just like, you know, I quite simply wish people would kill each other less, you know, and is there any kind of way that it would be like one big, you know, contract improvisation, or one big dance, you know, where you could do just about anything to a body within means of asking permission, but you wouldn't hurt the body, you know, and you wouldn't kill the body. You know, and so that's like, even though it's such a far kind of removed sense from, say, our dance tomorrow night on stage and our rehearsals, to me, it's direct lineage. It's like, going back to the beginning of the conversation, can we embody a certain level of hope and politics? You know, can we, you know, I've been calling this piece a certain form of kinetic diplomacy. You know, can we actually evoke a desire to treat each other more humanely by modeling with our bodies on stage with movement? So I think that to me makes the dance experience a very particular one and always political.
That's very powerful. I think we should open it up for questions and engagement.
Yeah, I was interested when we talked about the political conferences and how they're like bad theories. I always thought of them as bad rituals because it seems like they were solidifying and justifying power that they were seeking through that, which seems very different to me than art or theater, which I guess always they wisdom I have to communicate some message. So you should just talk a bit about like art versus rituals and politics, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
Great question.
I mean, it is a great question. I mean, and from my standpoint, I mean, the most powerful rituals are the most aesthetically complete, right? I mean, so, you know, you can have a badly crafted ritual, which is, and when I mean badly crafted, or badly intended ritual, which is to say that, you know, it's merely perfunctory. Right. This is just something we do at this hour, on this day, in this week, during the year. As opposed to a ritual you perform because it is transformative and transfigured. Right? The most powerful rituals will always be transformative and transfigured. It's not simply perfunctory. It's not simply something that we do.
Well, it's to me, because we rehearse a lot, and, you know, that's a ritual. To me, and I think to us, and we take classes, just had a wonderful class with Jen and Fran today. And it's, and I also find constructs of theater and dance rituals. And so I find that if I'm sitting in the audience and I feel they're doing it in a perfunctory manner, they're doing it because you're supposed to have a beginning and a middle and end, and you're supposed to engage the requisite number of people, and you take on a character, and you say a certain amount of lines, and there's a little bit of intrigue, but we've seen it a million times before, and I'm not learning anything new, then to me, I see it as a ritual that isn't very successful. So I can see your distinction immediately, but I also feel that they really, I see art as a certain kind of ritual. I also see, I don't do it as much now, having been out of New York a number of years now, and having a child and a family, but I had a ritual. I almost went 7 nights a week to theater. Sometimes I did. I went 5 to 7 nights for 15 years. And to me it was like, and not, I was a waiter, I had a decent amount of cash in my pocket, but it was like, I'll spend anything on art. That's just what I did, art and food. and so I did that. And then, at a certain point, it's like, wow, this is a wild ritual. I don't even know if I'm present in this anymore. I'm doing, when ritual becomes habit, and it's not a special kind of, again, I look back to the singular. That's why I like, individuals and group in the dancing. A ritual implies repetition. And yet, I think every time you would go to meditate, that should be the time that you're going to meditate today now. The time that you would, go and have this ritualistic dinner with an aunt or a friend. It should be that thing, even if it's in a series.
So it's interesting. I mean, part of what you're talking about, and more powerfully than when I was trying to get at, is the sense of the presence or absence of integrity in a room. So that, there's 6 months theater, and the 7th night with Aunt Bessie, if it is meaningful to you, you do it with integrity.
Right.
You're always there.
Right.
And unfortunately, we're not always there for these things that we feel obligated to do.
Yeah, and that I think is really, really crucial. We were talking yesterday as well about, I was just remembering what we would pretty clearly define as political art that I've seen, and let's say theater as opposed to painting, but I'm thinking of some painting exhibitions as well. And if I had to just completely judge them aesthetically, I would say, well, maybe this isn't the most compelling or well-acted or well-designed play, but I'll always remember it. And so it's like always a balance. It's like if something, because the messaging in that particular play had integrity, and it riveted me. Maybe the acting didn't. So it's like, and other times, you might do the opposite. You might go, say, to see a dance performance and say, I don't remember the music, I didn't really get involved with the choreography, but the performing, I will never forget. I could have watched that person or those people do anything. And then it was like, some of it's virtuosic or expertise. And at the same time, I also think it's integrity. Rindy Eckert, who visited the other day, the Dayton Residency and Theater Department, was walking around playing different instruments in one of our studios and saying, I don't know how to play the piano that well, but I have integrity the way I play this note and the volume and force that I give it and my attention to it makes it potentially gorgeous. And hopefully you want to listen to it.
Strong mix.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, as a performer in the work, that our rituals are very situational, and our rituals are like, we're in the scenario, so that ritual is always live, which is why it doesn't feel like it becomes that kind of non-aware ritual, because every night we're continually putting ourselves in this scenario that's similar to the night before, but it's always going to be a little bit different, and I think that's kind of like the bridge with your essay to live performance. Live performance is in a live scenario. And that's what's great about having Alex, is that you have theater and you have dance, and both realms work in live scenario. So I think that's kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that sort of, again, it goes back to this embodiedness, right? And so the occasion for embodiedness.
And to go take both your points went even one step further. I was thinking about Whitney talking about body ritual. And maybe the only evident one is Whitney's for a few moments in the piece. But I think once we kind of discuss that and the fact of, folks whose lives are on the line, whether through military, through poverty, through whatever, or just coincidence, that the body is what's at stake, aside from many other things. But it's actually the body, and that we're actually dancing with our bodies. And we're kind of, more than not, middle-ish class, healthy people. And so then there's almost a disconnect. Healthy bodies, but we're talking about states that maybe don't have health in the body, so that can we get to one of those states? I mean, a simple one is one I referred to before. If you dance your guts out for even 3.5 minutes, you're at an altered body state, and one in which there's much more vulnerability. And thinking of Alex as well, Alex instigated this exercise where everyone went around passing around a piece of paper, right? And everyone wrote about what they thought the other's character was. And so if there's 9 folks, then you had 9 versions of what that person's character was in the piece. And this was like, I think the night before we opened at the American Dance Festival in Durham. And it was kind of transformative because it was like a community's view of character. It went beyond the individual. It was pretty powerful. Yeah.
I guess I wanted you guys to maybe talk more about this concept that you have, that both of you have this like challenge to, or this question in your mind when you craft or when you're crafting either a class or a dance, which is what is going to inspire people to act outside of or beyond what I'm doing with them, or maybe in like a self-sustaining way. And so I guess to me, I wonder how, because being like a professor is just a different, like you have such a time to get to know the students and the students can engage with you, whereas an audience doesn't really play that role, that same kind of role. And so in dance piece, I feel like there are 2 different things. There are like the dancers that you work with that have one kind of experience, and the audience has a different kind of experience. And so I guess my question is like, how much of that interaction with audience and with performers and with students goes into the craft of what you were saying, like your messaging? Because I feel like as I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking like, well, what kind of audience would we see this? What sort of like, how much power do you really have over that, and what sort of preemptive thoughts are like valid to have? And so what does that mean? I don't know.
What a great question. I'll go out on a limb for a second. I think what power we have is limited. I think what intent we can have and kind of preemptive chutzpah is great and large, and I love the challenge of it. We did this workshop, Sarah, who's not here today, and Jess and I at the Drop-In Learning Center yesterday. And that will be in my performance tomorrow night. So I feel that everyone, and also I am in the habit of, there are, at last count, 32 con students in the show. And we've done, I think, 30 to 35 community-based projects over the last couple of decades. So literally putting the audience on stage is part of the methodology. But when that doesn't occur, then what are we thinking? I do think about, again, that idea of surrogate, that there's less of a division between the folks performing and the folks in the audience. That, like, can we do it together? And it comes back to this question that we're discussing. What spurs somebody on? What inspires someone? And I'm one that asks questions a lot. And the running joke with me is that we'll rehearse 1 hour and I'll ask people to come in and watch the creation and give feedback. A little ridiculous. But that's how much I want to know what we're doing, how what we're doing affects a viewer, and how that engagement works.
But can I responding or?
Please.
Because I think like saying a viewer, like in an audience, is, I don't know, like how, you mentioned earlier that you have some pretty abstract like ideas going on in the piece, and so I was just wondering how accessible that is for a viewer. Like, because in my own mind, of contrasting viewers with students, like, and as you said, like, you like to ask questions, that students kind of have this dialogue where clarification can sort of come forward, but with an abstract sort of presentation where a viewer, and especially in nowadays when so much of what we do isn't like actually there, right? Like it's on the TV or the kind of like I feel like a lot of us disengage when you're looking at something. So I wonder if that's also something that you maybe think about or think.
Yeah, and I'll return to the mention of Martha before of cueing. Is like I'll start a piece many times with a little snippet of text, because then I say, okay, these are the concepts, almost like beyond the title, or beyond the subtitle, but like the intro or the first chapter, the first paragraph. Please, you are invited to view at least the next section, if not the rest of the dance, through that lens. So that's one way that I try to purposefully cut down on pure abstraction. Not that I think it is a bad thing, but I do think that there's many times, not all the time, but in kind of the pieces that I do and that I like to do, a larger chance to start losing people and losing their attachment to the piece of art if it kind of floats in abstraction for too long, too much of it. So that's one of the ways I do it: text, visuals, or a concrete relationship on stage. If someone is holding someone up, maybe for a long time without any words, you want to know who's being held, who's holding, how long is it going to go on, is it friendly, is it sexual, sensual, violent, and I think that brings people in. I do get afraid of dance phrases going on forever, even though they feel really good. And on one level, I really like looking at them for what they are, the composition of them, the incredible dancing that these folks and other folks, you know, in the community that I know do. I am afraid of that. So that's one way. You know, I also say that not all the time, but many of the people that will come are kind of predisposed to be interested in a topic. That's a good and a bad. I'd like to go to audiences that you know haven't seen a lot of dance. I don't think people should even need to know the title. I've ever seen a dance concert before. I'm there to engage them. You know, yesterday at the Drop-In Learning Center, you know, what kind of dance are you going to do? You know, and you know, it's always nervous. I'm always nervous at one of those workshops. You know, there's levels of it's not going to work. There's always levels of rejection, all that kind of stuff. And then you just little by little, and then all of a sudden we're all best friends and dancing around. And I'm seeing this one young girl do this incredible horizontal leap and then roll on the ground. I said, "Where did you learn that?" "I just made it up just now." And that was like so unbelievable. She did it 3 more times. I said, "You made this up?" I said, "No." And it was like, that to me is like, you know, I'm going away from your, forgive me, I'm going away from your question, but it's not completely unrelated. It's like, I want to get that sense in the audience that they're saying, wow, they just did that, or maybe I just had a part in it. Maybe I helped by being here. If I wasn't here, it wouldn't, you know, be the same. So I don't know, a little bit, that's why, but I also feel that sometimes you do feel a lack of power. I remember, you know, Daniel, the neighbor, would always say, you can never, never, never. He said it to me quite sternly one time, just about holding me up by my throat. You know, because I came off the stage at what used to be called Dana. Is that all? Thank you, Rob. You're welcome. Classmates. Okay. But, and by the way, buy tickets today, right? There's only hundreds left, right? We're doing well, and there's this big picture in the day. But I say that, you know, jesting with Rob, but it's so hard to get a dance audience in New London. Martha's nodding her head, her whole body's going up and down now. But please tell anybody you can, because that's where it happens. If people aren't in the theater, it's really difficult.
I just wanted to comment on this whole sort of concept of an audience and the message and the viewer. I mean, I present various art forms, and you never know why your audience is there. You know, and I remember years ago here presenting a modern dance company from France that had ballet in the name of the company. And so a lot of those mothers brought their little girls who normally go and put on their tutus, and that was the wrong company for them to go to.
Or maybe they're dramatically right.
Right. Well, it could be. I mean, you never know what that piece is and what the message somebody's going to come away from. And so somebody coming to the piece tomorrow night might hear, you know, Underground and Weather Underground, and that's why I'm coming, because it's Weather Underground. Somebody else is in the audience because they think they like dance. They might not be sure. And so they're there. So everybody comes away with their own thing, and they might not get the message. But you hope, I mean, at me as a presenter, I hope that they get a message. You know, that, boy, I want to see more dance.
Yeah.
Or I want to learn more about the Weather Underground. Or whatever. I mean, and quite often I stand in the lobby after a performance and I hear things from people directly. Some good, some not good. Some people telling me to make promises of what I will do the next time. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, just a quick Joanna, in response to what you were saying. Think about how your question might play if you change the word abstract or abstraction with risk. Right. So that something may pose as abstract, right? So if some comes to a dance, they don't know anything about it, it appears abstract. Some comes to a dance, they don't know anything about it, and it appears to be a risk. Right? A risk is presented to them. To try to engage with it, to try to throw themselves horizontally on the floor and get the admiration of an internationally renowned choreographer. Those are risks, right? I mean, these are things we do in the classroom. Well, we try to do in the classroom. It's not always very successful, but we try to do these things because you're offering up these invitations to risk something different, right? So this is why we return to this language of transgression, intervention, right? Improvisation. That's risk.
Yeah, well, I also think that has to do with wrap the conversation back to the beginning about your idea of how the theater plays out, or sort of the paradigm. I think that one side of the political in art is that you have a specific message or a specific agenda that you want to get across. I don't think that this piece is that. If it is, it's really sort of universal, the fact that maybe we're all implicated by being a member of the world. That is sort of like, it's in the middle ground. I don't know exactly where it is. And so in some ways I feel like there isn't an answer. There isn't like, oh, as an audience member, I either got it or I didn't. Like, and I feel like, I mean, it's interesting too, because I am in pieces for other people who have a little bit more of an agenda or have a more presentational quality that I, as a dancer, have to put on airs or put on a body that does separate me from an audience, that I'm supposed to be virtuosic, I'm supposed to be something that that person sitting 3 rows in front of me can't do. And what's interesting is in David's process is like, that's not at all what he's interested in. He's inviting people to become part of what we do, and it changes our bodies in a way that it just changes what I do. I'm still doing a lot of the same kinds of movements, but it's like how I occupy my own being and how I negotiate my agency as a person with what I'm asked to do in relation to being watched. And that there's something really nuanced there, but it's real, and it's just a different paradigm. And that's, to me, really exciting, because as a performer, we get to be part of it, and we get to be in it in a lively, engaging way. And there's something there that is intangible, but it is political, and I think that's sort of the other side of the coin, is that David talks about that every instance or every moment has political ramifications, that I'm a white male who grew up in the middle class in the middle of America. There are implications to that, and we talk endlessly ad nauseum about those implications.
but we don't necessarily tailor those implications for a specific message. And I feel like that's really where art is different in how it frames itself as political or not.
I feel like, too, that we can't underestimate the power of kinesthetic empathy. So for the fact that you were like this in your chair as a viewer, there's also an inherent relationship that where my heart might start beating a certain way as I'm watching something on stage. And there's something that happens that gears you up in your body that it might not be you can put it into words. And maybe it starts to give us a new model for not thinking of a binary way of, are you with us or are you against us? But it's, oh, well, I feel this particular way. How did it make you feel? And then you realize specifically you are a part of the community of individuals where it's much more complex how we stand with something. So,
well, and it's fascinating because, you know, like that, right, that you described well what I was doing, sitting there like this, but Dave didn't invite me to the studio, you know, for me to dance, he invited me to talk, right? The thing that you do, that you know, which is dance, right? You have lots of hands.
There's a few recognizing actually physiologically, we do, our muscles are stimulated by seeing. We in turn reflect that, our whole body reflects on a physiological level, including if you sing, your muscles are, you're listening to someone singing, your muscles are actually producing some cueing is a very complicated issue and is on many levels. So you hold up the side, and that's one kind of cue. But the way you stand, the way your eyes roll, your mouth moves, and your ears roll, is yet another set of cueing. And beneath that is the way we can sense how you're breathing, and that's what.
No, it's not. No, it is a oversimplified version of cueing that you say, you know, words. Hey, it's going to be about this. I don't mean to say. I'm getting taught right now. We're 4 blocks from one another, so like school is always in session. But yeah, that it can. It's much larger than that. But I also do like ones that happen to be maybe a little more, you know, obvious. The signs sometimes. And you know what Daniel had said that one day. I had done this piece with a football helmet and a business suit because I had been a business guy and an athlete, and it was my like, you know, hey, I'm going to be a dancer now kind of thing. It was very serious for me. And I came out on stage with cleats on, and everybody started laughing hilariously. I'd never done it in front of an audience. I didn't know what to make of it. It was my first piece ever, I think. And then by the end of the piece, people got quiet, and I thought, oh, maybe they got what I wanted. And Daniel said, "Great job, Dorfman." And, in the changing room afterwards, and I said, "Oh, I don't think they got it." And that's when he got a little bit annoyed. He said, "What do you mean they got it? You don't have control over what they get. You do your homework. You do everything you can. You have that integrity in your creation." And part of that is this negotiation with the audience, whatever. It's a million things. The cueing, the subtleties, the outrageous, even potentially obvious modes. And then you present it. It's in other people's hands.
We're almost out of time. So we have 2 hands at least. So why don't we just take at least those 2, Taylor, and then in the back.
Well, just thinking about the creation of this view of a class reunion, I mean, how there's so many layers that exist in not only the message, but the topic that you're talking about, and then the inevitable, like, personal additions that are added on and enhanced or may take away. I'm just wondering how, like, as viewers of a teacher or of a dance piece, I mean, we're not supposed to separate those things, are we? We're supposed to take it with this grain of salt, which is one of you. And I'm just wondering how you two approach that.
You mean the separation of, say, creator and the creation, in a way?
And the topic.
And the topic. Wow, that's a whole common hour, I think, right? Well, the topic in this one, anyways, has kind of just delighted and frightened us. How much of the topic, how loyal do we need to be to Weather Underground history? We just found out yesterday that 3 of the Weather Underground are going to be their opening night in New York. We're going to have a question and answer, hopefully on the stage. It's not yet confirmed. afterwards. So that's like, you know, whatever, nervous making tremendously exciting. And in a way, we're not directed. We decided in the rehearsal process to not tell their story, even though I tell my take on their accomplishments at one point in the piece. So I'm doing a conscious effort, and kind of aided by Alex, to put my authorship placed in the piece at the beginning in one spot and the end. And then, in a way, to me anyways, the rest is these guys take on each other the topic, the subject matter, in answer to that question. It is all jumbled into one, and sometimes it does potentially drive us crazy. But I think that another way to me is this word of ownership or agency. It's like I want to give as much as possible to the performers. And sometimes I think I'm effective at it, sometimes not so. And Alex has helped immeasurably. And there's a text in it, what do I do now? And that's both subtext and context and content of the piece. So I think that it's a crucial issue.
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, for me in the classroom, you can just take the class with me. Largely, I'm just presuming that we're going to cover some content. And what I'm interested in is the points and routes of access that the students in the room find to get to that content. Right? So it's considerably more interesting to me and much more exciting if I walk in really not knowing what's going to happen. And my students say, yeah. Right? But this idea that you walk in and you know the students have done some stuff, and you ask them a question, and it gets lit up. Right? It gets lit up because all these things come into mind, and then I'm put in a position to not just moderate, but to engage. Right? And then to actually rethink what I'm doing. Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah, I had a thought from a while ago that just actually inspired a question for both of you. And I think it had to do with vulnerability within a process, and that I think a lot of hoping to inspire an audience or possibly students is to be present in vulnerability, either within your teaching or in your process. And I know in conversations with David and the entire company, just some things that we're asked to do on stage or that we kind of created within ourselves are incredibly vulnerable, especially in the researching of it. Maybe not once it's performance or at that space. Hopefully it stays alive in that state. But just in terms of strength within vulnerability and within political movements, those people that step forward and are really able to, be present in their body while they're facing a tank or while they're, like I was thinking about Tiananmen Square, the young woman that was run over in Israel a few years ago, the American woman, and just, how you remain present in your body. And that's where I guess the question is easier for me to answer in myself as a dancer, just how you remain present in your body. And I think that's powerful for an audience to witness because it's a visceral response. But I'm wondering for David, because I don't think I've heard you fully answer that, and also as a professor, as someone in a teaching model that's maybe working through a different framework, how you embody that or how you inspire that in students. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. Let me do mine because mine's faster and easier. Part of the riskiness of the classroom is the risk of silence. Right? In performance, you might consider, the risk of falling flat. Right? And being willing to take those risks. And, I'll say something, I'm thinking, wow, great question. It's a powerful question. And I'll get the look back from perhaps students in a room, in a packed room like this. And literally, they got nothing from me. And so, I have to entertain for myself. Well, am I willing to ride this out? Ride out this risk. With the hope that something, a dreadful 90 seconds later, something's going to happen. Now, often I will take that risk, right? And the success or failure of it won't be evident in that moment, right? It won't be evident even in that session. It might happen 3 or 4 weeks down the road, right? And so I'm kind of banking that riskiness of that interaction will reap something later on.
You know, my mind went to a couple things immediately, but one of them is performance. You know, I don't perform that much anymore, but I still really like it. And that idea of a combination of nervousness and vulnerability, and still trying to display what you've learned, like bring your history to the stage. So I just like that. I like to do things that have things that I can remember a bit, you know, some set movement that I've practiced, and then some improvisational movements, but even subject matter for internal dialogue, subtext. And that keeps me really alive. And I feel that there's this like unwritten contract. Again, I return to, you know, to Daniel's statement. I mean, you kind of, you've made an agreement that you're going to be out there in front of people, and you will have prepared, even if your preparation is not preparing on purpose. You've done this contract, and then you give, and you give, and you give, and you give, and then you give. And so I think that's the kind of model I like to use. And the teaching, particularly teaching here now, this 3rd year now in a row, it's interesting because there's more classes with same people, which is something I wanted to do. And it has caused me to prepare more and still maintain a little bit of play in the class. But, you know, as a perennial guest artist that goes everywhere, and you can teach some version of some class until you get tired of it, you know, because folks will probably enjoy most of it and all of it. And it's like you getting tired of it is the motivation. But now it's like both. You know, it's much easier that students will get tired of it, you will get tired of it. And the idea is, how do you go for that moment where something's happening, where there's interest on both ends? I was, you know, afraid yesterday to drop in learning, and then I was like really, really interested, exhausted. I was like fielding emergency phone calls, things like that, and really, really interested. So that's my goal. I want to be interested. I ran into this thing doing one of our athletes projects years and years ago, where I thought after like the 3rd one, we got this little bit of a group going. And so we went into, I think it was up in Northeastern in Boston, and it was a little bit of and again, it was a class on political issue. These were students that have jobs. I think it's called a co-op situation at the school. And so they were running off the job. They couldn't miss. They couldn't be late. And they kind of had a different take on this project. And all of a sudden, it wasn't working. And I thought, man, it's got to work. It's worked before. And I kind of went into autopilot. And actually, Lisa, you know, my wife Lisa Race was with me, assisting at the time. I became cynical and sarcastic, and even just with her, not with her, but about the situation, you know. And she said, "What are you doing?" You know, and then it dawned on me that you have to reignite every single situation. You can't take anything for granted, and that's what I think. You know, if I would define like activism, you know, it's kind of like returning again full cycle. It's like figuring out how to make yourself both strong and vulnerable, effective and open at the same time. And in dance, it's the body doing it. One direct example is like I do more exercises now, you know, like given straight more traditional technical exercise that I've done. At the same time, I also ask, like some of them I can't do very well. And I don't know if that's a good or a bad, but I'm like trying to impress the students more. It's not so important that I can do it perfectly. And so that is an inherent vulnerability, because I'm not going to come off looking great at every moment. But it's the idea that, is this a healthy, growthful exercise? And I think that's a little bit of a shift too as far as embodying vulnerability and still doing something that has strength, hopefully.
Come see Underground tomorrow evening in Palmer at 8 o'clock. David Dorfman.